Every year, lots of weird things happen in the world that can be classified as real, bona fide mysteries. Lots of horrible and bizarre things have happened in 2018, and what's worse, these are all mysteries that we still don't have answers to. Here are the unsolved mysteries of 2018. Back in 2001, some engineering students from the University of British Columbia suspended a Canadian flag-bearing red Volkswagen Beetle from the Golden Gate Bridge. Not to be outdone, in 2018, an anonymous person in Toronto did the same thing on some random overpass. According to The Guardian, the car was a hollowed-out Honda Civic, which had all its identifying marks removed and was dangling by a cable. At first, officials thought it was a movie prop, but there weren't any movies shooting in the area at the time. What's more, no one recalled seeing suspicious-looking people pushing the car over the edge or lifting it up, both of which would have been difficult to miss. Police got the car down without incident, but to date, no one has confessed to the prank.
That is crazy. I've never ever seen anything like that before. I mean, I've driven these trails for years and years, and I've never seen anything like this. This is hilarious.
Friends knew the Hart family of Washington state as beautiful examples of opening arms to strangers and supporting racial equality, but investigators think the parents might have intentionally killed themselves and their children. In March, the family's SUV plunged off a 70-foot cliff into the Pacific Ocean. Sarah and Jennifer Hart and all 4 of their children were either confirmed dead or missing and presumed dead. Authorities said that Jennifer, who was driving, had a blood alcohol content of 0.102, while other family members had high levels of an over-the-counter medication that can cause drowsiness. Also, there were no skid marks at the scene, and the onboard computer indicated the vehicle stopped and then accelerated suddenly before plunging off the side of the cliff, possibly suggesting the act was intentional. But there was no suicide note, and friends and family were adamant that the couple would never have done such a thing intentionally. However, neighbors recently reported the family to state social services because one of the boys kept coming over to ask for food and reportedly said his parents would sometimes stop feeding the kids as a form of punishment. And in 2011, Sarah had been charged with domestic assault against her 6-year-old daughter. No one is sure why American government workers in the southern Chinese city of Guangzhou suddenly started falling mysteriously ill, but the incident was eerily reminiscent of the unexplained illness that affected U.S. government workers in Cuba in 2017. Those incidents were described as sonic attacks that left victims with a strange assortment of symptoms, including fatigue, insomnia, and cognitive issues. The first person affected in China was an employee at the U.S. consulate who reported subtle and vague but abnormal sensations of sound and pressure. In April, the employee was diagnosed with a mild traumatic brain injury and sent back to the United States. Then, in June, officials reported that more Americans were being screened for similar health concerns, and many were being evacuated. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo spoke about how it compared to the Cuba incident.
Very similar and entirely consistent with the medical indications that have taken place to Americans working in Cuba.
A soda machine in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood was a mystery for many years. Its sodas only cost 75 cents, much cheaper than other vending machines, and it also featured a mystery button for those who like to live dangerously. Furthermore, no one knew who owned it or who stocked it. Then, without warning, all the buttons became mystery buttons, and the price went up to $1. And then the machine just disappeared altogether, leaving behind a note that simply said, "Went for a walk." On the machine's Facebook page, the explanation for its sudden disappearance was elaborated to, "Going for a walk, need to find myself, maybe take a shower even." At the end of October, it still hadn't returned, but its Facebook page has been pretty busy, featuring images of the intrepid soda machine traveling the globe, hanging out with bears, and posing next to famous landmarks.
I hope it comes back, in these troubled times. We don't need this happening on top of everything else.
Polio was officially eradicated from the United States in 1979. For those too young to remember, the disease was highly infectious and caused 15,000 cases of paralysis every year at its height. And now, in 2018, a mysterious polio-like illness sickened 3 children in Pittsburgh and a handful of others in Minnesota and Illinois. The disease is called acute flaccid myelitis, and symptoms include muscle weakness, facial and eyelid drooping, trouble speaking and swallowing, paralysis, and possibly death. But AFM isn't a specific virus. Rather, it's triggered by something else like a toxin in the environment or a common virus that causes minor cold-like symptoms. AFM isn't entirely new, but the fact that there are clusters of cases implies there's a particularly insidious contagion floating around this year, and the Centers for Disease Control still isn't sure what it is. Washington Post reporter Jamal Khashoggi fled Saudi Arabia in 2017 when the kingdom became increasingly hostile toward people who were openly critical of the royal family. On October 2nd, he was visiting the Saudi consulate in Turkey, where he intended to obtain some paperwork he needed for his upcoming marriage to a Turkish citizen. That was the last time anyone reported seeing him. Turkey blamed the disappearance on a hit squad of 15 Saudi nationals who were flown in just for the occasion. But Saudi authorities denied they'd had anything to do with the incident. And to prove it, they joined with Turkey to launch a joint investigation into the disappearance. In the days that followed Khashoggi's disappearance, the Saudi explanation finally boiled down to an interrogation that turned into a brawl that somehow also involved a bone saw and a body double. Then in November, various outlets reported that the CIA concluded that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had ordered Khashoggi's assassination. However, U.S. President Donald Trump disputed this conclusion, while congressional Democrats and Republicans have criticized Trump's statements on the matter.